Transformations. One of the most hyped moments in anime history. Seeing the main character achieve a new state to defeat the main villain is a trope that has existed in the battle shonen demographic for decades. They always seem to increase the hype during the arc in where the transformation happens, and many series have gained a lot of recognition due to its transformations, with the biggest example being Dragon Ball Z, which started in the 80s. But going into the current era of shonen manga, One Piece, which has been ongoing for over 20 years, has also used a lot of transformations throughout its run, like the gear forms from Luffy for example. But there is one transformation in One Piece that managed to stand atop of the rest of them, which shocked millions of fans around the world when it was first revealed, and that is the form Gear 5. This transformation has become so iconic as of recent, and is probably the most iconic transformation to have come out from an anime in a long time. I think the only other transformation that is on the same wavelength in terms of popularity is the first Super Saiyan form from Dragon Ball Z. And if you were to compare Gear 5 to other popular shonen transformations, Gear 5 tends to be a lot more unique compared to the rest of them. But what makes Gear 5 so unique, and why is it the perfect transformation for a story such as One Piece? This is a video where I go through how Gear 5 Luffy redefined transformations, and why it's considered one of the most well-written forms ever created in anime and manga. So what makes Gear 5 such a well-written transformation is the huge amount of thematic depth it has in the story of One Piece. One Piece has a lot of themes implemented in it, but the overall core theme that has stayed consistent with the entire series from the very beginning is freedom versus oppression. The world of One Piece is mostly governed by the world government, which is an organization formed by the 20 kingdoms during the Void Century, and ever since that time in history, the world government has the most authority in the entire world. And this has led to celestial dragons becoming so filled with power because they are the descendants from those 20 kings who formed the world government. The celestial dragons have the power to have whatever they want, and this has led to slavery, which literally takes away the freedom of those who have been enslaved. And any kingdom who rebels against the world government risks getting wiped off the map, and this has led to the destructions of islands like the Lelouch Kingdom and the land of Ohara. This just shows how much authority the world government has, that they even have the power to wipe up any island they choose if they go against their orders. And it's not just the world government that uses oppression as part of the theme. Pretty much all the main villains in the series of One Piece has at least used oppression as a way to achieve their goals, taking away the freedom of their victims in the process. Crocodile had control over the dance powder as a way to cause drought in Alabasta, and this led to the civil war in Alabasta, which caused Vivi to suffer and asked the Straw Hats for help. Doflamingo took over as King of Dressrosa, and he used to keep the citizens who were turned into toys as slaves who would be forced to work at the toy factory to export items to the black market for his business. Enel was the god of Skypiea, who would strike down anyone who would go against him, which instilled fear and discomfort in the Skypieans. Kaido and Orochi took over the land of Wano for over 20 years by making the citizens outside the capital suffer by keeping all the food and the fresh water for themselves, which led to poverty in the villages outside of the capital, with people as young as Tama for example not being able to eat a decent meal. And there is so much more examples of other villains taking away the freedom of their victims to achieve their goals. So this theme of freedom versus oppression is so prevalent that it is present in pretty much every arc in the whole series. And with Luffy, he represents freedom, which is the direct opposite of all the main antagonists and just the entire world in general. Luffy's goal is to become the king of the pirates, and he believes that becoming the king of the pirates is being the freest man on the sea. This means that in order for Luffy to fully achieve his dream, he needs to be someone who will never be bound or controlled by anyone. As you see Luffy on his journey to becoming the king of the pirates, he is constantly meeting different people who have lost their freedom, but then Luffy eventually frees them from their suffering. His first encounter in the series was with Kobe, a boy who was forced to work for Alvida as a cabin boy after accidentally boarding her ship. But Luffy gave Kobe the courage to stand up for himself and to never be bound by becoming a cabin boy for the rest of his life, but to instead choose his own fate and chase his dream to become a Navy soldier. The first time Luffy met Zoro was literally tied to a pole with his freedom taken away, but it was Luffy who freed him and allowed Zoro to continue on his path of becoming the world's greatest swordsman. Nami had her freedom taken away by Arlong for a long time, when she had to constantly draw him maps and bring him 100 million berries in order to get her village back, only for Arlong to steal that money away from her by working with the marine soldier, because he never intended on letting Nami and her fellow villagers free. But then Luffy saved her by defeating Arlong, and this let Nami choose her own fate by joining Luffy and drawing a map of the entire world as her dream. So wherever Luffy goes, he constantly finds people who are in need of saving, and he frees them and gives them the chance to make their own decisions, and not to be under the control of anyone who would try and oppress them. The whole theme about freedom versus oppression is what eventually led to the creation of Gear 5 Luffy. Gear 5 is the form where Luffy feels that he is at his peak, where he feels the most free, where his imagination is filled to the max. The true name of his devil fruit is the mythical Zoan human fruit model Nika, and his power is stated by the 5 elders to be the most ridiculous power in the world. It was modeled after the sun god Nika, who was also known as the warrior of liberation by slaves in ancient times. So Gear 5 is the full embodiment of Luffy's freedom as a pirate. It is the true embodiment of the overall theme of One Piece. The form has no limits to his imagination because it literally turns Luffy's freedom into a combat style. That's why he's able to show Toon Force type of abilities that defy logic, like breaking the laws of physics, controlling lightning, and turning the ground into rubber, because Gear 5 is unbound by logic. When you look at the other transformations from other anime series, the transformations tend to be a lot more serious and more linked with rage and negative emotions. But Gear 5 did the opposite. Gear 5 is a more playful and more imaginative type of form, which is unique only to Luffy, and that is what makes Gear 5 so different than the types of transformations that we are normally used to. It is linked with more positive emotions like laughter and joy. Laughter and joy perfectly describe Gear 5, because the world of One Piece has so much tragedy and so much evil tyranny, which have been caused by not just pirates but the world government as well, because of how corrupted the organization is. But laughter and joy is what Luffy will use to take down the evil within the world. Even when you look at Luffy's whole personality throughout the series, there isn't a single character who smiles and shows joy more than Luffy. He is always shown positivity and is always up for a great adventure no matter what island he goes to, regardless of how dangerous the island may be. And because of this, it has an effect on those he meets and interacts with. He changes and inspires those around him to become better. So in order to combat those tragedies and the centuries of oppression and suffering that has occurred in the world of One Piece, laughter, joy and freedom is what's needed to fight off against the oppression. This is what made Joy Boy an enemy of the world government during the Void Century. Joy Boy literally has the word joy in his name, so he must have represented freedom, laughter and joy, just like how Luffy does in the current era. And Joy Boy also ate the human Nika devil fruit, and he was the main enemy of the 20 Kingdoms before they formed the world government after he was defeated. But even though he was defeated, Joy Boy made sure that the messages and the poneglyphs would be passed down for generations, and he even left the One Piece treasure on the final island. And then when Roger and his crew reached the final island and the treasure, all they could do was laugh. It was because Roger and his crew burst into laughter after hearing about Joy Boy and the Void Century that they named the final island Laugh Tale. This shows how important laughter and joy is in the core theme of One Piece, because these positive emotions are linked to freedom, which is used to combat against oppression. Joy and smiles were very prevalent as well throughout Wano, like with the smile fruits for example. Those who eat the smile fruits and are unable to gain powers will smile for the rest of their lives, and Yasui talks about why it is so important to smile even when things get tough. Upon Odin's death, he died with a smile on his face, after he let his 9 samurai carry on his will of freeing the lands of Wano, and this all leads up to Luffy transforming into Gear 5, where he smiles as he was changing into the Gear 5 state. Luffy is now the current user of the Nika devil fruit, so he has inherited the will of Joy Boy as the next warrior of liberation. Another theme that directly ties to Gear 5 is the sun versus the darkness. The sun is very symbolic in the world of One Piece, because it is used to represent the dawn of a new era. It is connected with the Sun Pirates, founded by Fisher Tiger, who set the slaves free from Marie-Joie, and the sun is also associated with the sun god Nika, the warrior of freedom. When the One Piece series first begins, we learn about how Goldie Roger kicked off the Great Pirate Era, which inspired Luffy to want to become the next Pirate King. So this was literally the dawn of Luffy's journey of becoming a pirate. Then during the fight between Ace and Blackbeard, Blackbeard represented the darkness, and he defeated Ace, who represented the sun. This showed how darkness defeated the sun, which is exactly what happened with Joy Boy in the world government. Joy Boy was the sun, and he was defeated by the world government, who controlled and oppressed the world, hiding a lot of his darkness like Emu from the world's surface. But Luffy will eventually be the one who will destroy the darkness, and Gear 5 is meant to be the next warrior of liberation, who will finally free the world from evil. This is why Gear 5 is the most important form of Luffy, because Gear 5 is the embodiment of the will that Luffy has inherited from Joy Boy, that will one day take down the world government that once defeated Joy Boy during the Void Century. Another factor in what makes Gear 5 Luffy the greatest transformation in modern shonen is the huge amount of foreshadowing and build-up that led to this form. Gear 5 serves as a payoff to over 20 years of storytelling, making it very special. Even from the beginning, we know that Luffy came from an island named Dawn Island, and the word dawn is important because it means a new beginning. The dawn relates to the sun, because the sun is associated with the beginning of a new day. The first arc in One Piece is named Romance Dawn, so the word dawn has always been a part of the series ever since its beginning when Luffy began his journey. We first hear about the Will of D at the end of Drum Island, when Dr. Correa had noticed that Luffy had D in his name from his bounty, and she talked about how the Will of D still lives on, because inherited will is another of One Piece's core themes. It was stated in a conversation between Law and Rocinante that those with the Will of D in their name are said to be the natural enemy of the gods. The gods are referring to those who stand on top of the world government, like the Celestial Dragons, the 5 Elders, the Knights of God, and Emu. To this day, we still don't know exactly what the will of D is, but the fact that Luffy has D in his name has always made the world government very wary of him, and have kept close tabs on him because of his lineage ever since he started as a pirate. We get more clues of Gear 5 with the first hint of Joy Boy back at Fishman Island. He was first mentioned in the poneglyph that Robin read, and he was a very mysterious person in history who lived in the Void Century. And then when we see Zunisha doing Zo, he was also from the Void Century, and he was Joy Boy's companion. Luffy was also able to hear his voice from the Voice of All Things, which is an extremely rare ability only a few people possess. In Skypiea, we have a panel of Luffy dancing with the wolves around the fire, and when we first learn about the song on Nika in Wano, Nika's pose is very identical to the dancing pose of Luffy all the way back from Skypiea. Just the Skypiea arc alone did a great job in foreshadowing Gear 5, as Luffy was the only one who was able to take down Enel, the god of Skypiea, because of his Devil Fruit powers. I made a video where I went into more detail on why the Skypiea arc is very important, so if you guys are interested in watching that video, I'll put the link in the description. Not many transformations are as built up as much as Gear 5 has, and that is what makes Gear 5 so well executed. So what made Gear 5 Luffy the greatest transformation in the current age of anime and manga is how he managed to embody the core themes of the One Piece series, and he's also unique to Luffy as a character, whose goal is to become the freest man on the sea, who will not be bound or controlled by anyone. And Gear 5 was the payoff to over 20 years of storytelling in the One Piece series, which is why Luffy referred to Gear 5 as his peak form, because it's the culmination of all that the One Piece series was building towards. And if you guys enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.